Camera. Well, I want to thank you for coming this morning to talk with us about your life and your recollections of living in Pittsburgh, Texas. This is an interview with Nina Johnson on November 12th, 2009 at the Pittsburgh Camp Public Library in Pittsburgh, Texas. The interviewer is Jim Conrad, and this is part of a project that we're doing with the Pittsburgh Camp Public Library to preserve local history, particularly history of the African American community in Camp County. I usually like to start with just some early information on the person that I'm interviewing. Can you tell me where you were born and when you were born?
I was born in Pittsburgh, Camp County, November the 16th, 1917.
Well, you got a birthday coming up, don't you?
It'll be 92.
92. Well, you're very active for someone that's 92. Can you tell me a little about your father?
My father was born October the 6th, 1858. And of course he was born to slave parents, and he was brought to Camp County when he was left Georgia, coming to Camp County when he was 1 day old.
Did he ever tell you anything about his early childhood here in Camp County?
Yes, some things. He was, his owner was just about a mile from where I live now.
And did he grew up here in Pittsburgh?
He did. As far as I know, they came all the way from Georgia to Camp County, and he lived here all his life.
Where did you go to school?
I went 1 year in a little community out where I live now called Faker. It was a Faker Switch. It was a train where the train stopped, to pick up passengers. And I went to Garfield School in the first grade. And from second grade to through high school, I went to school at Paul Lawrence Dunbar in Texarkana, Texas.
What do you remember about going to school in Texarkana?
Oh, the first thing that came to my mind was I had to take a lunch to school, and it was always a sandwich. She's laughing. And 1 year I had a sausage biscuit sandwich, and for some reason I didn't eat that lunch that day, that sausage and biscuit. And at the end of the year we had to clean our desk out, get it, and that sausage and biscuit had petrified. That's one real thing I remember. And that was when I was about in second or third grade.
Do you remember how you got to school?
Walked. Had to walk. They didn't have buses then.
Did you have some favorite subjects in school?
History.
You liked history. Do you recall that they taught any African American history?
They did. At the school I went to, they did teach African American history.
Now that was a school.
Well, we had to buy the books. The state didn't furnish the books, but they allowed them to teach it. And we had to buy the books.
The families had to buy the books for their children.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been a burden on the family.
I don't know. I lived with my sister and brother-in-law. She managed to buy it. Bought one. And I did it. A man that was real active in the museum. I was going to give the book to the museum, and he took it. I let him take it home to read it first, and he died before I ever got my book back.
Oh, that's a shame.
I sure did hate it, because if it had been in the museum, I would have still known where it was.
Well, you kept that for all that time, and then it got lost someplace.
His son, who was a doctor in Longview, promised to bring it back to me, but he never did.
Tell me a little more about your father. What did he do for occupation?
He was a farmer. Is that what you meant?
Yes, yes, he farmed.
Mm-hmm.
And can you recall what kind of crops he grew?
Sweet potatoes, peas, corn, cotton. I don't like to mention cotton. Want to know why?
Yes.
I had to pick it. Well, I had to dig the potatoes too. We had to do everything. I don't remember pulling corn, but I remember digging potatoes and picking peas and picking cotton, hoeing cotton.
Did you do that you did that for your father? Did you do it for other farmers?
Sometimes we did. If we got through with ours, and then after my father health got bad, he didn't do as much farming, so we worked for other people, picking cotton and digging potatoes.
Was he farming when you lived in Texarkana?
Yes, sir.
And did you live in the countryside?
In Texarkana?
Yeah.
No, in the city.
In the city?
Mm-hmm.
And did he have a farm out? His farm then was...
No, see, I lived with my sister in Texarkana. After his health got kind of bad, the last 3 children lived with other brothers and sisters to go to school. So they didn't have to support us.
So then, did that mean you didn't have to do any farm chores?
Not much. Because I came here and lived with my family in the summertime. But what farming he did then, we still had to do it.
What was your least favorite job on the farm?
I guess anything in the field. I never did learn to milk a cow, though. We had not a lot of cows like people have now, just to support the family. But I never did learn how to milk a cow.
Did you have chickens and pigs?
Pigs and horses, some cows, not a lot. Not like, people just raise cattle. Now we didn't raise cattle to sell.
When did you move from Texarkana to Pittsburgh?
When I graduated from high school. See, I came here in the summer. When school was out up there, I lived here with my parents in the summertime.
So your father and mother lived in Pittsburgh or outside Pittsburgh, and then you went to school in Texarkana?
Mm-hmm. And one sister and a brother went to school, lived with brothers in Marshall and sister.
Was that difficult living not with your parents, but with...
When I started, it was. I can't remember coming home from school and going to, we had outside toilet. And I can remember going down there when I'd get home from school crying because I didn't like living up there. When I was real 7 years old, that age.
You missed your parents.
Yes.
When you were in school in Texarkana, what kind of activities did they have in the school in terms of sports or recreational activities?
Football, basketball, track. They had most of those things. And it didn't, I guess, volleyball, because they had something that girls did besides basketball. But I couldn't do any of it. I had a problem with my side. I couldn't do any of the sports. Couldn't run, track, or anything. So in what is the class that teaches? It's sports.
Physical education.
It's physical education. I got my best grade from dancing in physical education. That was the only thing I could do.
Did you go to any dances while you were in Texarkana?
To the football banquet. And I liked I still don't like to cook, but I liked my, see, you should have gotten me a little bit earlier, I can't remember. Homemaking. I liked that. And we had to cook a meal for the football fellows to teach them etiquette. We enjoyed doing that, cooking, but I still don't like to cook.
What would you do when you came home in the summer to live with your parents on the farm?
Well, I worked in the field. I remember my youngest brother, the one I was closest to, when I got tired and it got hot, I'd do something to make him mad, and he'd make me go up to the house, and I wouldn't have to work anymore that day.
That was pretty smart.
I learned how to do that.
Did he ever catch on to that little trick?
If he did, I didn't know it. Sometimes I believe he did it, sent me to the house on purpose because it would be so hot, in the field. I think he did it so I could, because they had some little grandsons that my mother took in, and boys, and they worked in the field.
What kind of clothes would you wear when you were working in the fields?
Whatever we had. Worst looking, my best school clothes I didn't work in.
Now, how did you get your clothes? Did your mother make them? Did you buy them?
She made them. My sister made them, and I had an aunt that sewed. But she didn't make too many because that was the way she made her living. But my sister sewed and my mother sewed. And my mother worked for white people and bought a lot of, clothes from white people like that. I came along during the Depression,
Did your mother teach you any skills like sewing and cooking?
Well, she taught me sewing, and I could embroider, but she never did teach me to knit. I'm forgetting again. To do the crochet.
Crochet.
I couldn't do that. I never could learn to do that.
Did you have some chores around the house, like cleaning up the house and washing the dishes?
I had to do that and wash dishes. Yeah, I had to clean the house. Wash, iron. My mother washed and ironed for white people. I helped do that.
Tell us a little about your mother. What was her name?
Paralee. Paralee.
Paralee.
And her mother was a Cherokee Indian.
Did you know your grandmother?
I didn't know either one of my grandmothers. They all died in their 50s, both of them. I never did know them. Grandfathers either.
Do you know how your mother met your father?
Well, he lived in one community and she lived in another. I imagine they met going to church somewhere. I'm not sure. My father was 17 years older than my mother.
70?
17.
17 years.
Yes.
17.
Mm-hmm. And they both had been married and their spouses died and they got married. They had 4 children together. She miscarried some, and my father was the father of 17 children.
Ooh.
His first wife had 13. She died in childbirth. And then he married my mother. And she had 10 when they got married. And then they had 4 together.
How many of those lived in the household when you were around?
At one time there were 18, including the parents. But by the time, well, I was pretty young when my older brothers and sisters got, because they have children older than I, that were, I'm the last of the, as they say, the last of the Mohicans. I'm the only one living there.
Tell me a little about the farmhouse where you lived here in Camp County when you were coming here in the summers.
I barely remember the first house. The only thing I remember about it, the well was on the back porch. It wasn't away from the house. It was on the back porch. And that's all they built another house when I was 2 years old. And I remember going up, watching them build on that house. It was pretty close to the one that we had lived in. And it had 4 bedrooms, little sitting room and a dining room and kitchen. And then, since my father died, they widened the highway and they tore that house down and built my mother another house. But it's still there. I live in it.
Lived in that. How did they heat the house in the winter?
Wood stove and wood. One bedroom had a double fireplace. My mother's room. And I never could understand that. My mother's room and father's room had a fireplace, and the boys had a fireplace. And I just loved looking at that fire at night. But, and the girls lived on the other side of the house. And at first there wasn't any fire in there, and it finally had a wood stove.
And cooking, what kinds of food would your mother prepare?
What we raised on the farm. And she was the best cook my father thought in the county. She was a good cook. I don't know why didn't like to cook, but I did. But she was a real good cook.
Can you recall any of the meals that she would fix for you?
Now, most people have turkey for Christmas and Thanksgiving. We always had a goose, a big goose. And I guess I got the banana pudding from her because we thought we had the best dinner in the world when we had banana pudding for dinner. And she candied sweet potatoes. We had peas. And during the Depression, I told a man one day at the grocery store that I was glad my paycheck had come because I wouldn't have had enough money to pay for my groceries. And I said, when I was growing up, we had peas and cornbread one day, and next day we had cornbread and peas. And there was a white man behind me that was a little older than I was. I said, do you remember that? And he said, yes, that's the only way you could change the menu. It was kind of funny, but she made real good cornbread, chicken and dumplings. And she made a chicken pie that I've never seen anybody else make. It was like you'd make a peach cobbler or something like that, but it had chicken instead of fruit. But it was made with milk and pastry. And when I got married the first time, she made 6 cakes before she got one that she thought was good enough for my wedding cake. And it was a coconut cake, white cake with coconut. She was a real good cook.
Can you recall what you had for breakfast?
During the Depression, we had biscuits and gravy. The kind of gravy you make with steak, they call it thickened gravy. But when we had killed hogs, we had bacon, of course, and we would have eggs, because she raised chicken. But most of the bacon, eggs, except during the real Depression days, we had dairy or any other kind of food.
Was canning a big
Oh, our dining room floor wall was just rolled up with canned goods. She canned everything that she could. She even made stew, canned stew in the wintertime. Like we opened canned goods, she could open a jar of anything. She canned a lot, 200 and 300 jars. But it's, each year.
And then, did you have a smokehouse?
We had a smokehouse, and that's where they hung the hogs when they, smoked them, salted them down, and then they hung them up.
Tell me about how you would get items that you didn't grow on the farm, like coffee or other things. Where would you go to buy groceries that?
Pittsburgh. We once had a buggy and a wagon, and they'd come to town and buy whatever we had to buy.
Were there certain stores where you could shop in Pittsburgh?
There was one that was Clark's grocery store, and one was can't think of the name of the other one. It was the last one to close, and one was Lee's grocery store. There were about 4 grocery stores, and we only have one now.
Were those grocery stores where blacks could shop with whites?
Yeah, we all shopped at the same store. But the black people, that came to town from the country would sit in the back of the store till they were ready to go home.
Just to wait until it was time to go home?
Mm-hmm. Sit and talk to other people, in different communities.
Was this usually Saturday when
Saturday.
You'd all go in?
Mm-hmm.
And would you go in and walk the streets and shop with your parents?
Most of the time. Sometimes we didn't, but occasionally they took us.
Did you live? You mentioned it was the Baker community.
Baker.
Mm-hmm.
Faker.
Okay. And then did your parents move to another
My
rural community, or they lived in?
no, my father started buying the farm I live on when he was either 21 or 22. He got married when he was 21, and he lived with his parents the first year they got married. Then he started buying the farm I live on now. He never went to school. He couldn't read or write. But he bought this farm, and once it was 200 acres. He could not read or write. My mother could.
Is she the one that sort of made sure that he didn't get cheated, or that the accounts were correct?
I guess so. And he had real friends, white people that helped him, a lot.
Well, he must have been, he was very successful if he owned his own land, had his own farm.
He sure did.
Were there other black farmers in the area where he owned his land?
Mm-hmm. There was some few that owned there. But his was bigger than any of the others.
Do you know how he was able to save the money to buy the land?
I don't know how he did that. Of course, they would borrow money, and when they raised the crop, they paid it back.
Borrow from the banker?
Mm-hmm. Yes. He could do math. He called it figuring. He could do that. He could help the kids with their arithmetic, but he could not read.
So he knew money, and he knew figuring and accounting, and
Yes.
And so that he couldn't have. No one would take advantage of him in that regard.
As far as I know, nobody ever did. He once or twice he lost. Once I know he lost his stock, his mules and horses, because he couldn't pay all of his bills. But that was the only time I remember that he lost anything. And one time he got behind with his tax, and one of my sisters, the one that I lived with, was able to pay that for him. And after the boys got grown, and I'm sure they helped him because he got to where he couldn't do too much.
When did he pass?
In 1941, he was 82.
And he survived the Depression without losing his land.
Sure did.
That's remarkable.
That was when my sister helped him when he had problems with his land.
And did your mother then continue to operate the farm after he passed away?
Yes, she still did as much as she could. She plowed, with the mules, and still took in washings and all. She did that for a long time before he died, because he had high blood pressure and he died of a stroke. So she did a lot of that before he died, because he wasn't able to do anything. But my mother was 106 when she died. She lived exactly 40 years after he died. She died in 1981. He died in 41.
What did she attribute her long life to?
I've never really heard her say, but I think you don't remember when there were tramps, do you? They call them homeless people now, but back then they called them tramps. She was afraid of them, but she would feed them. She'd be real afraid, but she'd feed those, and she'd do anything for anybody. She'd give anybody her last dime. So she didn't ever drink or smoke or anything like that.
What would she have done if one of her children got sick, if you got sick? Were there home remedies? You go to the doctor?
The doctors would come out, but they had home remedies, so rare. When we had one of these boys that she reared used to have some kind of fever every summer, and the doctor would have to come out there, and he never charged my mother a penny. He'd take whatever vegetables, she had growing, but he never would pay. He came every day until this, and that happened every summer till the boy was grown.
Was this a white doctor?
But we didn't have well, there was one black doctor here. I don't remember him. I don't remember what he looked like, but he was white. We had two white doctors at that time.
Now in the 30s and maybe into the 40s, did you have a telephone in your home?
At one time we did. At one time, I don't remember having one, but I can't remember the first one, but I remember we had one after they put them back in the country.
Can you tell me when the family got its first automobile?
I can't tell you the year, but I can tell you that my father left home, went to town one day. I guess he must have walked to town, because when he came back, he was driving a Model T, and he never drove it again. Drove it home. He had never driven before, and never drove it again. My brothers did the driving.
So he had a chauffeur. He didn't want to drive?
I guess not. Yeah. And that's the only one I know he bought, was that Model T. And it was new. I don't know how he did that. You know how he had the money to do that. But I guess he paid for it like he did everything else.
Borrowed the money and then paid it off. Now, what did you do after you graduated? What?
I stayed at home, and that's when I worked in the field for somebody else and helped my mother with the washing and ironing that she did for people. Did a little bit of everything.
And tell me how you met your first husband.
I really can't met him uptown, I guess, back of that grocery store, 'cause he lived in another community on the other side of town, west of town. But I guess that we met in back of these grocery stores. And he finally, he taught school out in another community. They called it Bolton Community now. Do you live here?
No, I live in Hunt County, so you
I
need
was
to.
thinking about her.
Oh,
She knew what I meant by the Bolton community was the reason I asked. He taught school down there, but that marriage didn't last but 7 months.
and then what did you do?
I went to college 1 year after I finished high school, first year after I finished high school. But he didn't have student loans then. My father wasn't able to send me, so I didn't go but 1 year.
Were you thinking of becoming a teacher? What?
Not really. I was interested in the homemaking, the sewing part, not the cooking part. I would have taught homemaking, but I couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do then. I would like to have taught history.
That was one of your favorite subjects.
My most favorite.
What school did you go to? What college?
Bishop.
Bishop.
Baptist College.
And then what did you do? See, first marriage, and then what did you do after that? You met your second husband.
Well, that was a long time after that, about 6 years, I believe. He lived in almost the same community the first one did. And he taught school a while, and then he went into the service and came back. He didn't finish his college education. He came back and finished his college work. Oh, he was an insurance manager. He didn't teach anymore after he came out.
Well, tell me a little about him. Was he from Camp County?
Mm-hmm. He lived in what is now the Rocky Mountain community. He lived up there. And then when he came out of service, we got married in 1945 when he first came out of service. And then we lived in Towle. That's when he became an insurance man.
And how long did you live in Tyler?
13 years. I think it was 13.
And then you moved back to
Pittsburgh.
What brought you back to Pittsburgh?
This is where my home was, my mother. And one of my brothers had to leave East Texas because he had asthma so bad. And when he moved to El Paso, he gave me his house. I never lived in it. I lived with my mother because, my mother was pretty old by then. But I have lived in her house ever since I rented the one he gave me. And it burned. I rented it out and it burned, and I never did build another because I lived with my mother.
Tell me a little about downtown Pittsburgh when you came back from Tyler.
I worked at a cleaners, Caden's Cleaners, and it was a real good job. The people I worked for were wonderful people to work for. If she wanted something out in town and it was raining, she wouldn't send me. She'd go in the rain, but if the weather was fair and she wanted something, she would send me. But she would not send me out in the rain. It was a husband and wife, but she did most of the work. His health was bad. But I worked at that cleaners when I came back.
And what kind of work did you do in the cleaners?
Pressed. Used to press and finisher. You know, the things that you had to do then with an iron.
Tell me some of the prominent black families in Pittsburgh or the surrounding area at that time.
Well, let me see. The Cashes, Miss Cash and Mr. Cash taught at the Center Point School. They were a very prominent family. And the teachers that taught at our school lived in Pittsburgh. They didn't live in the community. And then there were the Cersei's and Bells. Mangrams. Can't think of any more right now.
Tell me a little about the churches in Pittsburgh.
The first church I remember, it served as a church and school. The school was in this church. That was the church in this community and where I lived. And then it was more than a mile from our house. So my father and mother, my mother gave the church, I think it's about a half acre for our church. They gave them that land so they could move closer to the community because it was up in a white community because the land had been given to them by a white person. And then there was a Methodist church across the road. My church was Baptist, and there was a Methodist church across the road from. My father gave them that land, and then he gave the school land. It was a Rosenwald school. He gave the land for that school, and the promise was if that school disbanded, the land would come back to my father. But it didn't. My sister had to buy it. She bought it and built her house there. And every community has a church almost, and with 5 or 6 members. None of them have a church full. There's only one church, well, 2 churches, a Church of Christ and one Baptist church that have a lot of members. People don't go to church like they used to. Did you know that?
Yes, yes. What happened to that Rosenwald school?
They consolidated with the school uptown. And I don't know what became of the building. My sister finally bought the property. I guess they tore the church down.
What were some of the other all-black communities in Camp County? We've got Center Point and where you lived. Were there other rural all-black communities in Camp County?
Well, Union Chapel, I'm going by the churches, Independent Hope and Antioch Baptist Church. These were the rural communities.
Dr. Conrad, we're almost to an hour.
Okay. Let's take a little break and
The next time, but
tell me about your work for the County Historical Commission and your involvement in historic preservation here.
well, the book was the biggest thing we did while I was a member. They finally closed. One thing I did was catalog, I guess you'd say, all of the black cemeteries in Camp County, all except 3. And there were lots of them. That one, the one you see uptown, was the largest one I had to do. And it took several days, but I cataloged every one of those, except 3. Except 3.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, you had mentioned off the camera that about a private cemetery.
That's my family cemetery. It's the only one in Camp County. It's just a black family cemetery. And my grandfather had to go to the Civil War with his master. I don't know what he did. You know, people weren't as interested in, they heard these things and thought they'd always remember them, but you don't. He went to war with his master, and I don't know what he did, whether he cooked or fed the horses or what he did in this part, because there wasn't a black regiment in this part of the country. And one of his little girls died while he was away, and his master's wife gave him land to bury that baby up on, and so they gave us it. I believe it was 1/3 of an acre of land for a cemetery to bury the child in. So that's all that's buried that there is our family. My maiden name is Traylor, and that's the name of the cemetery. And my name, am I on camera?
You also worked at the county museum.
I was a receptionist. I retired when I was 90. And I hated to quit then, but my health was, if I didn't have any volunteer help, the lady from the office, one of them would have to come and do the tours. And it was, to me, it wasn't fair to her, so I retired. But I wish I could have kept on.
Were you the first black to work in the museum?
Mm-hmm. The only one.
The only one so far?
Mm-hmm. I'm still I was a member of the executive committee. Committee when it first started, but for some unknown reason, somebody there thought I was being a member of the executive committee. I was also my boss. I mean, and that didn't quite work. But I was a trustee, and I'm trustee emeritus, and all of that went with that executive committee thing. And so when they had to take me off of both of those, but in taking me off, I'm still allowed to be a member, only I can't vote. I attend all the meetings and all that. I don't vote.
Do you think that black history has been neglected? Maybe here in Pittsburgh and Camp County or other places?
I think it has in the school, because I don't know if they teach black history now, but they didn't when I was, Douglas was going to school. Douglas, at the black school, Douglas, they didn't teach black history. And, a lot of our inventions were done by blacks. One that I can think of right now is the traffic lights. And a lot of things. The first heart doctor, and a black invented the blood plasma. There are a lot of them. I think it should have been taught.
Did you serve on other committees and boards?
Well, trying to think. I don't know if I served on any other board. I can't remember, but I know I was a member of all of those things. Cancer, art, Chamber of Commerce. I was the first black to be voted Woman of the Year. There's only been one other one, and I was voted Volunteer of the Year. I did a lot of volunteer work. lots of it.
That's great.
I nearly passed out when they said I was Woman of the Year. I couldn't believe it.
What has motivated you to become active in the community here?
Oh, I guess my father always wanted us to have a education, good education, and my mother, encouraged us to do things. She did things like that. She used to be, she traveled more than any other black woman in this community. She was worthy mistress of a lodge. She did things like that, and she encouraged us. But
When did you start seeing a change here in Pittsburgh in terms of blacks being asked to serve on boards and asked to be volunteers and on white, which were basically before then sort of white organizations or groups?
it was mostly since the civil rights movement. But a lot of black people didn't take advantage of things like that, because I did a little bit more than most. Not to have had, I know one man that worked at the museum always told me he wished I had gotten a college education, but it just wasn't possible. Then I could have gone in later years. I can't blame that on anybody but myself. But when I was school age, I couldn't. I just always wanted to do something like that.
Did you follow the civil rights movement in the 50s and the 60s when it was getting started?
You mean like on television?
On television or even, yeah.
Yes, I did.
And what was there any spillover here in Camp County? And
I never noticed any real bad things. Now this school, when it was consolidated, they had trouble in a lot of schools like Little Rock, but Pittsburgh didn't have any problems. And I was proud of that.
What happened to the Frederick Douglass School after integration?
They finally consolidated it with white. And some of the Douglass graduates got together and they bought the property. They own it now. They have activities there. Funerals, some people want their funerals there. They do all sorts of things there. But they didn't have, as far as I know, they didn't have any problems integrating.
Back before the civil rights movement, did you vote? Could you vote here?
Oh, my father voted before he died in 41. I have, what did they call them?
Poll tax?
Poll tax. I still have some of his. Tax. receive.
Did you ever discuss politics at the dinner table?
Sometimes we did. When my father, I believe the first time my father voted was for President Roosevelt. We discussed who we thought would. Is that what you meant?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Roosevelt was the first president he voted for.
At that time, did you have a radio in your home?
We did. We had a battery. My mother managed to get. We had a player piano. We had a radio. We had, I believe, the first refrigerator in the community. I don't know how she managed. She worked hard. And I never could figure out how she lived to be 106. And had a memory when she died. My memory then wasn't as good as hers. She never forgot a thing.
What? Did your family subscribe to a newspaper, magazines?
When she died, we were taking a Gazette. She took a farm magazine. That's why I say I just don't know how she did all those things. Because my father's health was bad for so long. But we took the Gazette and 2 different farm magazines. Progressive Farmer and can't think of the name of the other one. But she took 2.
Let's go back to the radio. Did you have any favorite? Tell me your favorite programs on the radio back in the 40s.
I'm going to tell you who. Light Crust Doughboys. That was one of my father's favorites. Can't think of anything else. And of course, religious programs on Sunday.
You went to church every Sunday?
Every Sunday. I still go every Sunday. Every Sunday. We used to have church at night, but you know the black churches don't have church at night anymore.
Wednesday night and Sunday night?
Mm-hmm.
Is that when they would have their...
Yes.
What, can you recall any religious revivals that you attended?
Oh, plenty of them. Way back, they don't do them in our that church anymore. Because there's such few people to go, and you have to pay the preachers that do it. No. But we had revivals back then. And I can remember dinners on the ground at church. You know, that's what they call, because they didn't have fellowship halls then, just sanctuary. Women would bring the food in big old boxes and tubs and all that kind of thing.
And you would eat, on picnic tables outside?
Usually they might have some picnic tables. Food in the back of a wagon or something.
Was that an all-day event?
Usually. stay all day till the night service. Because a lot of them would live too far to go and come, in one day.
And would you bring in special preachers and singers?
Usually a preacher, and now they bring the choirs and other people. Yeah, other people would come, from other churches.
What has been the high point in your life, or one of the high points?
Well, I guess the high point was when I was voted Woman of the Year. Because I had no idea what I was doing amounted to anything, It really, and my youngest brother, I think he was prouder of it than I was. I guess that's, and then when I finally had a child, that was, I guess, the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because I'd lost two and I'd just about given up.
Well, that changed your life, didn't it, having a child?
It sure did. Still got him.
And his name?
Samuel. But we called him Freddie. I was going to name him Freddie Charles for his two grandfathers. My father's name was Charlie, and his other grandfather was named Freddie. And my mother wanted to name him Samuel, and I had one of those. I didn't want another Samuel. So I named him Samuel, but I called him Freddie.
You had it both ways then.
Mm. They was proud. It had been a long time since they had a little boy in the family, and they were as proud of the boy as I was.
What do you think needs to be done in the next 10 years to improve America?
Oh, that's a good question. In some cases, seems like I don't have any problem, but in some cases, civil rights could be improved. Now, like I say, I don't have any problems. I've never been mistreated in any way. My father didn't teach us. I might as well use the word hate white people because of slavery. We weren't taught that. Everybody to him was, like the Constitution says, created equal. We've always had white friends, but it's still, in some cases, could be better. I'm not complaining.
Well, a lot of progress has been made, and
I know
more needs to be done in certain areas.
I know that. That's the reason I don't complain. Because a lot of progress has been made. Because we used to have to go to the back door to eat, drink at a different fountain, even if they were side by side. A lot of things have been different, made different. I've traveled a lot, and I've stayed in motels and hotels, and I've never been mistreated in any way. I know there have been a lot of progress made.
Back during the civil rights movement or earlier, if say the black community or people in the black community wanted, say, the city to create a park or do something, pave streets, how would they have gone about letting the city know what they wanted?
Well, there was always somebody that could do that. I know one man here now would have been good at that. He loves to see the black community progress, and he would have gone and talked to them for whatever they wanted.
Blacks didn't have anyone on the city council or the school board, so would there have been somebody in the black community that would have approached maybe a member of the school board or city council and said, we need this done? Maybe your father, who was, probably very much respected.
Mm-hmm. And they had trustees of the school. Now he would have talked to the trustees. That was who governed the schools then.
This is probably a good time maybe to close the interview. We have another person in the room, Andrea Weddle, who is operating the camera and our LSTA intern. Do you have any questions for Miss Johnson?
No, I don't, but I've really enjoyed listening to you today.
Well, I have plenty of time if you have anything else.
Well, we might like you to come back again, and we can think up of some more questions. What advice would you give to say a young black woman who's just starting out in life and may need some guidance from somebody that's a little wiser and older?
I'd advise them to do that. Have mentor, someone that you respect and know that has lived a good life. It's always good to get somebody else's opinion. Since I'm
Someone just looked in the window thinking maybe this might be a door, or maybe they're bringing us lunch.
I read the sign on the door to tell you to go to the other door. I'd advise them to trust the Father first, God. Trust Him, and then there's always somebody that knows more about something than you do. And I've never been ashamed to ask if I didn't know. since I didn't go on to school.
Do you think history is important for young people these days?
I do. I think it's good for them to know what happened before they came on the scene. I guess that's because I like it so much.
Well, we want to thank you again for coming to the public library here in Pittsburgh, and we want to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you.
We even brought you a little present. Do you want to get it for us? Is that
Yes, sir,
what
that's
it
it.
is?
You know, the lady, I worked at the hospital, and the lady that was really responsible in a way to getting the hospital bill, she was a dietitian at the hospital where I worked, and every payday I gave her something on this library if it wasn't but $1. So I feel a part of and used to visit the hospital, the library a lot. I'm so proud that we have a library.
This is a beautiful building and facility, and that, you know, volunteering, that's got to be very rewarding to the volunteer.
It was for me, and I wish I could have volunteered here, but at the time I was full. Do you know Miss White, the lady that's responsible for this hospital?
No, I don't.
They used to own the Gazette. Dick White was his name. His family owned the Gazette until he retired. There was nobody then to leave it to, because their son was something else. He lived in Austin. But she's responsible in a way for this library.
For the library. Did she raise money? Can donate money?
That's the way they built it. If I didn't have it, didn't see where I could give but $1, I gave her it, and she took it.
So, okay, so we have to thank you in part for the library.
And then I'm a member of the Genealogical Society. I've been a member of everything lately. But time comes when you have to stop.
Well, you're contributing right now to preserving history of Pittsburgh and Camp County, and this will be added to the